All right, so this session is a table talk discussion titled The Call to Care, Nurturing Relationships in the Classical Lutheran School, and it will be led by Mrs. Julia Habrecht, who is former headmaster of Emmanuel Lutheran School in Alexandria, Virginia, and she has recently relocated to Our Savior Lutheran School in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where she will serve as headmaster. Please welcome Mrs. Habrecht.
Good afternoon and welcome. I know many of you just attended Pastor Paul's wonderful session, and we'll just be continuing the discussion of culture. And this is intended to be discussion-based and kind of question and answer-based. This is a topic that is near and dear to me, school culture broadly, but caring for the individuals in our schools is something I know you are passionate about, but I just love to talk about and I love to do to the best of my ability. So our job here today will be to talk about caring for people and the people that we have been called to serve. No matter our particular role to care for various individuals in our schools, we are part of the culture, that large and big culture that is often kind of maintained and guided by the head of school and our pastors and all the subcultures Pastor Paul talked about. It is our delight to express love for our neighbor, especially as we are considering how to serve them in the two kingdoms, both caring for their spiritual and secular needs. So who is it that we're serving? Pastor Paul helpfully articulated some of the people in our midst, but why don't we, as a way to get warmed up for discussion, just call out, who are we serving? Okay, in our midst, who are our neighbors that we're serving? Students? Parents? Faculty? Congregation?
Board.
Our board? Okay, donors. In this context, we're serving the broader classical movement. Our colleagues. We might identify particular staff with particular needs, maybe our faculty versus our administrative staff. But there are many people in our midst. And then we need to think about our own vocation in relationship to the various individuals in our schools. We have the beautiful doctrine of vocation and provided endless opportunities to serve for one another. The table of duties, of course, helpfully admonishes us and guides us as workers, and it guides us as employers, and for all of us, that we would love our neighbor as ourselves. So as we think about our specific responsibilities and our own callings in our schools, whether we're administrators, raise your hand, administrators, pastors, classroom teachers, okay, great, other administrative staff, board, CCLE folks, we should think about our responsibilities. We don't all have the same responsibility. We talked about culture with Pastor Paul as being about habits, about duties towards we have for one another, towards one another. So thinking about all of these constituents or groups, those are business terms, but all of the people in our care. What are some general ways that we can care for anyone in our communities? Just call them out. First one on the list, great. And actually, I'm going to stop there. Who was it that said prayer? Okay, one of my favorite things to do, my new faculty don't know this yet, some of my previous faculty know, I like to have giveaways and prizes and quizzes. So, you get our first giveaway. It's a little text, poems by Gerald Manley Hopkins, so enjoy. Okay, I have two more giveaways. You still have a chance. Okay, prayer. How else do we show care to our neighbors in the school setting? Okay, mercy.
Conversation.
Okay, good, conversation. Be specific here. We want to get kind of down to brass tacks. So communication, okay?
Kind words.
Okay, so the kind of communication, the care, Okay, I have written down truth in love, right? Good, honest communication.
Consistent.
Consistency, great. How do we show care to people? Think about
Just listening.
listening, okay?
You have to ask them about themselves.
Okay, listening.
Say thank you.
Okay, manners, excellent. Beautiful speech, just in kind of our general interactions. Okay, you're not saying something that's really obvious, which is okay. You're Lutheran, you understand that we are embodied creatures, but relationships involve being physically present with each other, right? If you're a teacher, maybe this doesn't need to be said. You're physically present with your students. But if you're an administrator who really prefers to sit behind your desk, that's probably not going to aid you in kind of some of the things we're talking about, right? Communication, listening, relationship building. What gets in the way then of these general responsibilities in caring for each other? Pastor Paul mentioned a few of these. What gets
Bureaucracy.
Okay. Church politics.
Busyness.
Conflict, busyness.
Our devices.
Okay, devices. Maybe it's lack of interest, maybe it's just tiredness, personal challenges in our own home or in our own relationships, our own need for care. Go ahead.
I was going to say fire back.
Great. Okay. Okay. So we've had a challenge in one of our relationships. Maybe that's with a student. I know I can think of times when I acted too harshly with a student, right? Oh man, I could see that on their face. And so I needed to rebuild, right, that relationship and trust and speak maybe more lovingly. I needed to ask for forgiveness and to model that. So as we're thinking then about this care, let's talk specifically about these different groups in our community, the different individuals, and we'll just think of them collectively. What are some ways, let's be as specific as possible, okay? What are some specific ways we can care for teachers? And we're largely talking about administrators here, but
Ask their opinion.
okay? Ask their opinion.
If you don't understand something, talk to them and seek understanding.
Okay?
Providing a planning period.
Okay, giving them time, right? Real things. Okay, and now, go ahead.
Helping them to improve at their craft.
Okay.
Getting to know
Getting to
them.
know.
Really getting to know them.
How do we get to know our
Just through relationships.
Okay.
I think even when your faculty, it's kind of like the family that prays together stays together. I think that's the same with your faculty. I think when we pull people together and get to know people, you're less likely to be critical.
Supporting them when they have issues with families, parents, being present at very difficult conversations about scholarships.
I like to sit down with faculty and work through an outline, whether they're calling a parent on their own and they feel comfortable doing that. Let's talk through this. Or I will be with you when you do this. This is how we'll run this conversation, right? What else? How about acknowledging our faculty members' successes? How about acknowledging strength? Especially when you know they have something special planned in their classroom at your morning faculty meeting, inviting them to share that with their colleagues. Let us know what's happening. Tell us about this literature project you're working on. Giving them a chance to share their expertise. One of the things I'd like to do is unpack the challenges and the tensions between caring for everyone at the same time, and the conflicts that arise when caring for your teacher maybe is in conflict with caring for a student, or appears to be. Your teacher really needs that planning period. Your teacher also really needs the professional development and wants it. And there's a particular goal you're working on with the teacher, and maybe there's some urgency, right? Maybe it's an identified need that they really ask for help on. And there is no planning period, right? And they're swamped after school. And the only way to give them a planning period is to ask another faculty member, maybe who has an extra planning period, to step in and do that. Or for you to do that, even though you don't have necessarily that time. How do you care for that faculty member in that case? How do you give them the time they need?
Take over their recess period or
Okay. Be creative, start to be creative.
loan review.
Students, what are some specific ways we care for students?
Interact with them so they know who you are.
Okay, build relationships.
Know their names.
Know their name.
Take care of them when they're sick.
Okay? Take care of their physical needs, right? Band-aids. Ice packs. How about giving our students boundaries? That's the way we care for our students. How about articulating those boundaries carefully, lovingly, probably again and again? How about publicly acknowledging them if they have a success? And you have to think carefully about that, right? You don't want to maybe set up unnecessary competitions, but there's time and place for acknowledging these things. When you do have to discipline, are we doing that as privately as possible? Are we facilitating forgiveness between students? Are we using manners with them in the way we're expecting them to use manners with us? That's caring for our students, right? Making sure they understand these things. Holding teachers accountable to these things too on behalf of our students. Okay, parents, let's kind of quickly move through a few of these other groups. How do we specifically care for parents? We have some scenarios to walk through. Parents.
Communicate.
Okay, what is that? Give some really solid examples of what that means.
Email anecdotes from the kids' day.
Okay. Think about our administrative roles too. Okay, and that could be the administrator who stopped in to observe the class and during carpool was able to share that anecdote. It means I know your student, pay attention to them. I cared enough to tell you about it.
Convincing them it's not a crisis.
Okay.
I'd like to know how much time you think is appropriate to spend per week. So how many hours per week you should be spending communicating with parents in your office or on the phone, and whether anyone else has an idea. What's too much of your administrators' week? What we
Individual conversations?
Yes.
And is this crisis related, or I use that word broadly, but to address specific needs, or in terms of just kind of general relationship building and things like that?
I think it's going to change based on the size of the school.
Right, for sure.
We have a larger school, you
Correct.
have more parents who want time. But yeah, typically it's a problem, right? Usually you're not going to have people coming to encourage you as an administrator typically. So how much time do you think?
What do you mean?
Yeah. Right.
This is all about encouragement. This happens all the time.
So do you think there's a balance there? And if so, how would you suggest to manage it?
Well, certainly part of caring for people is setting limits, right? And even if that is in a particular conversation, whether that's with faculty or staff, one of the things I like to do is set expectations at the beginning of the conversation, or even the length of time that I will have. And, we're here to, and setting up the expectation for what it is we're going to talk about, or where we, is this, I'm here to listen. I don't think we'll have a solution today for the challenge, right? So just again, that's about clarity, consistency. If you keep that kind of model for communication, parents will also come to understand that and expect that. The size of the school is of course going to matter, the state of the school, if there is a particular kind of issue that has bubbled up to the top, if you've been proactive to reach out to people so that it doesn't bubble over. I mean, it's a significant amount of time, but gosh, it just really does vary. Does anyone have a thought about that based on your school or how much time you're spending now?
I think what they ask for, you give them.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we have the luxury of saying, if a parent asks for a meeting, to say no. So what time they need, you give them. There are appropriate ways to say goodbye and end the conversation, but in terms of the amount of time needed, I think our job is to say, yeah, I'll meet with you.
Yeah, and I think, again, setting some of those limits, I do think some conversations run their course, especially if you have them multiple times. You may need to set a limit that says, we have talked about this. You know, but that last conversation, you know, was the final word. If you have you know, let's say this is a grievance, you have a grievance policy, you know, if you would like to speak with the pastor or the school board chairman or whatever your policy would dictate, that would be, you know, potentially a way. But I do think Kate is right that we want to be expressing care in this way, and that's responding. And I, you know, would say the same is true for faculty, but setting limits and helping guide faculty through that, given everything else on their plate, is also important for the administrator. Okay, how else do we serve parents? Good communication, timely, consistent, proactive, clear.
Invite them in to the school.
Right. Have them be present. Good.
Provide them resources.
Okay. So education, we want to educate our parents. Good. Okay, we can be praying for our families and parents. We'll be doing that publicly as a way of caring and loving for them.
I think something that's come up in some of these might be a way to care is being consistent and being clear alone. Like those things can be such gifts to the parents when they know where you stand and they know they have that in you and their children will have that in you.
Right. And some of that is in relationship building and kind of those conversations. Some of that's in policy, right? There's clarity. That's caring and loving and then communicating policy, acknowledging when policy isn't being met, right? Whether that's a parent issue, a student issue. These things are hard, but they do express care. Okay, just being visible, right? Having a visible presence, whether that's, you know, everyone's circumstances are different. If you can be in carpool, you should be in carpool. It just takes time, but that's when you share that anecdote where you are a visible presence for parents. You're smiling, you're saying things like a woman. These things matter, right? The first interaction a family and student has with you, with your school, each day, let alone the first time they come to visit you, but they come in the morning and maybe someone isn't excited to get out of the car, but you're there, you're happy. Those are good things, the way to care. Okay, congregation members, let's keep moving. How do we care for our congregation members? They are supporting our churches. They are helping us teach the faith. They are often providing the needed financial resources that we need to do the work.
Keep them informed.
Okay.
Clean up after shared spaces.
Okay. Very practical, right?
Do care packages for shut-ins.
Okay.
Don't crumble when they use the school.
Okay.
Make them feel welcome.
Okay. In terms of coming in and participating in the life of the school, great.
We do a volunteer appreciation, which includes most of the church members. Not most of them. Most of them are church
Right,
members.
right, yeah, great.
I wish it was.
Okay. Anything else?
Show them what their support has accomplished.
Okay. How would we do that? What?
An art wall.
Okay.
An open house.
Okay.
Some of the church members don't walk the school halls. They don't know what's behind those doors.
Okay.
Have the kids sing for the church.
Singing in church.
Putting thank you cards into the bulletins.
Okay. Creating a list of addresses and writing letters, thanking congregation members, bulletin announcements, great.
I've got an idea. Having a congregation, like some of the members who were former teachers, asking if they would want to join you in praying and come into your classroom, praying, reading a story, or just sharing the classroom, the thoughts, the ideas, and listening to them tell you stories about when they were a teacher and what they did.
That picks up on some of Pastor Paul's things too, right? You're part of a culture that's existed, and depending on how long you've been in your school, right, it's important to be listening.
Something as simple as making sure they're invited to the Christmas service or things that the school is doing, art show, all of that kind of stuff.
Donors, how do we care for our donors? Maybe there are parents, maybe there are congregation members, maybe they aren't.
Some of it they do on handwritten.
Okay. Handwritten notes, just across the board. Students, parents, congregation members, faculty.
Visit their store or wherever they work.
Okay. Right, so there's a local business, show them that appreciation in that way.
Keep them informed.
Okay. Right, update them. Okay, so we have a framework of who we're serving. Depending on our vocation, we may or may not have all of these responsibilities, or we may be inclined to some of these habits more than others. So I think just given the room, I have some big scenarios to play out. I think maybe we'll just try them with a large group and see how that goes. And you could also try to split up and chat if possible. So this is starting to get at the administrator's decision-making role. And the principles that we'll talk about could apply to a lot of us. We're all in particular places of authority, even in our classroom, right? We have authority over students, and there may be competing needs of the students, and we're trying to decide how to be best served in the home. This is certainly the case. You have children to serve, you have a spouse to serve, you have other needs, and how, when there are competing kind of interests, so to speak. Okay, you had advised a new transfer family that their child would likely thrive by repeating the grade they had completed at another school. In Washington, D.C., we call this reclassing. It sounds very highbrow. After a lot of conversation with the parents, you were comfortable placing the child in the grade that they wanted. The classical curriculum and expectations are proving new and challenging to the student, and even with tutoring and support from mom and dad, the child is requiring a lot of one-on-one help from the teacher. While some of the adjustments just make more time, may take more time, parents of other students in the class are noticing the extra care for this child and starting to complain. Mom and dad of the new transfer student are confident. They are putting in a lot of time at home. They're confident this child is going to thrive where they are. Your teacher is frustrated. She doesn't know who to help and when, and parents are complaining. How do we care for this student, these parents, and our teacher, our other students, their families? And I realize there's lots of nuance to these, so.
Could we get a parent that already knows the ropes to kind of be that mentor or that helper?
Okay. So is there anyone else who could help the child in the classroom and help the teacher remain kind of broadly focused?
I would say starting with the parents. If they're only helping at home, can one of the parents get in there to the classroom to be the assistant, who will also then see what's happening in the classroom and possibly realize for themselves the difficulties.
A paid tutor.
Okay.
I know you preface this with a lot of explanation, but I would want to make sure that all of those things are what they seem to be.
Okay. Right. So dig for information.
Yeah.
Make sure that what's being reported is true. Do your own observations, right? Okay.
Another student, you could hear me, sorry,
That's okay.
helping get the new one acclimated.
Be willing to admit that you might have made a mistake by letting them be in that grade.
Okay. And these are difficult decisions to make, right? There are no guarantees. What would be really helpful to make sure, right, that it happened as part of that conversation? How would we have cared for that family from the beginning?
Set that expectation that this was going to be evaluated along the way.
Right,
It's
okay.
not a given.
Right. So if you have policy and good conversation in advance, okay?
We have policy in place that at 9 weeks, there will be evaluation for newly enrolled students, especially those that start later than a typical kindergarten student. So there is check-ins all along the way to make sure there's no surprises at the end of that when we either have to say it's time to make some other major movements forward that will greatly impact the child and the family.
What happens if you, go ahead.
I had a question about that. So in 9 weeks, you evaluate and then decide what, that the child needs to be in a different grade, or how does that work?
It could run the gamut. It may also be, as an example, we had a child who came in kindergarten, but there were, the behavioral issues were so intense, and we brought in other professionals to help this child, and by January, we'd already been on that road, meeting with the parent on a regular basis, but by January, we had to let the child go, because we could no longer serve their, we really were unable to serve their needs, and it was impacting the classroom at such a great disadvantage to the teacher and the other students. So in that regard, we had to do that. But by actually putting in place a time, it already is setting up for parents the understanding that, you know, this isn't, you know, we bring this child in under the auspice of we care for you and this child, and we know that it may not be the best transition.
Yeah.
And if it's not, I mean, we want to set them up for success, and if it isn't, then we have to make hard decisions.
Yeah.
Bouncing off what Kate said, we've used a contract with the parents when the students come in and say, we're bringing in a student now, it needs occupational therapy. Or the parents are responsible for regular occupational therapy, regular speech therapy, and then the last bullet point in the contract is, while we don't think it's necessary, or similar wording to this, while we don't think it's necessary, parents will provide a private tutor in the room if it's deemed necessary.
Right, and again, having kind of these things clearly laid out as best as we can. A great policy exists. Okay, I already have great policy in this one. Outlining procedures for expelling students. The policy, though, requires board notification and approval. The student in question is a 6th grader who has been consistently disrespectful, is influencing this culture of the school in a consistently negative way, and recently used profanity in a text chat with a classmate, which is also against stated policy. The faculty administration has been documenting behavior for multiple years, and the specific actions meet and exceed the threshold for expulsion. Several board members have high respect for the parents, who have largely been supportive of the school and have worked hard but have been unable to influence their child toward better behavior. The daily challenges of the student are wearing on the teacher, who is frustrated with you, the administrator, and the board. At the recent meeting, the board voted to give the child more time to improve. What do you do, administrator? How do you carry?
Get the board chair or some other representative in the room for a meeting with the teacher. Don't just play go-between trying to make two sides happy.
Okay, so facilitate maybe some communication that could potentially be more helpful, more direct.
I would ask the board for where the line is. If this isn't across the line, please show me where it is so we can act when it happens. This and the last one both seem to me to be problems that were difficulties, whatever you call them, that came from, you saw something, and it got a little worse, you kind of dealt with it, it didn't, then it got a little worse, right? And so with this one, right, if it crossed the line,
Right. And a lot of policies are black and white, but most of what we deal with is not particularly black and white.
Yeah.
Right, which is how these things then play themselves out in ways that are challenging, because the teacher's feeling a particular pull, the families are feeling a particular pull, the students are, maybe frustrated in a scenario like the last one in particular.
I don't see a person in this scenario that couldn't benefit from talking to them about the blessing that God's law is for us. That there is gospel, but the law does help us and help children to grow and parents, and just pointing them to what Christ has taught us about our behavior, maybe that would cause the change, whether it be in the board or the child or the parents, to make a choice that might significantly improve the situation.
And caring for family might be this extreme.
I think you gotta look at too, are there other underlying issues? Is there counseling that needs to take place?
Sure, and maybe there are. And so we might be inclined to care for a family in that case, right? But is that appropriate as we care for the other students?
Well, you don't want to sacrifice the rest of your school.
Right, exactly, right.
The family is a member of the church, is the pastor involved with parents, with the student.
Great.
That should definitely happen.
Great. You must have read my next scenario. So a member of your church, long-time members, got married a number of years ago, that's so excited to send their children to your school. So eager. They are proselytizing everywhere they go about the wonderful school. And it is time for their son to enroll. And you have an admissions process that even for your congregation members mean they're going to come in and have conversation with you. Their child will meet their prospective teacher and have an assessment, so we can get to know the child in advance. But formal admissions decision and enrollment contracts don't happen until that process is completed. A number of faculty members have noted that this child's behavior in services is challenged, and little people have challenges. We know that. They don't always sit still for 90-minute divine service. That's not reasonable. But have expressed kind of privately concern that maybe something else is going on with this kiddo that needs attention that we might not be able to provide. You set up some expectations like you do with all families about the process. You join the assessment from the beginning to just have kind of a separate and extra pair of eyes along with the teacher. And there's no question, both you and the teacher do not believe the student can be enrolled. Love this family. You assess students in January, they don't enroll till September. A lot can happen for the 4- and 5-year-old during that time. So you let them know you want to repeat. Let's meet again before the school year starts. Right now, we're concerned about enrollment. We're concerned that you and your child will be very frustrated with kind of expectations. We lovingly try to share that this child's behavior is outside of even the range, right? And we know there's a range of abilities. You reassess and have the same perspective. How do we care for this family?
Help them identify other resources that they could potentially.
Okay, are you aware of other resources? Is there another school? Okay, good. Like, you're going to extend yourself really above and beyond in this case, right, for this family?
Show them that you're not doing anything unexpected, that every conversation that you've had has kind of demonstrated.
Okay, so try to gently and lovingly, right? But they're shocked at this decision. They can't believe it, right? So maybe gently trying to kind of walk through that. Let your pastor know that this might be a family that needs some care, okay? might create some other, issues with congregation members who you can't share these details with, right? Someone says, I can't believe you didn't let in this amazing family. You can't share that with them. You can't communicate at that level of detail.
Carefully let them know that things could be different in the future. That could feel very condescending when you don't want them now and you want them later. But to let them know that
Right, this doesn't close the door permanently.
it's not a permanent closure perhaps, and it'd be very delicate to do, but
Well, as best you can, specify what it is when your kid can sit still for 10 minutes. You have to
Okay, give them some real specific goals, right? That is something, in my experience, I've tried to do with student assessments, especially when we're saying this is not the right fit, is give specific feedback. Right? These are your children. These are these amazing parents' children, and you're saying, it's a great fit. You're on board philosophically and theologically, but this isn't a fit. You need to give some specific reasons, right? And some maybe goals or benchmarks for the future. Okay, shifting gears. It's budget time. You're working with your board and congregational leadership. You, in this scenario, kind of are responsible for helping shape and draft the budget, and you have done that with a moderate tuition increase, which your families are used to, but able to include robust faculty and staff increases to meet inflation. An influential board member insists on a marginal tuition increase to help families manage their finances. You know that other members of the board who are remaining silent believe that tuition increases should be higher, but they don't speak up. Members of the faculty are counting on you for these increases to their salary to keep up with rising expenses. Pardon?
Come up with a 3-year plan, so it's not like.
Okay, so work with your leadership to address things a little differently.
Develop a scholarship program for those who might need assistance.
Okay, are there other ways to provide that assistance? Okay. If you don't have a commitment to a 3-year plan yet, what do you tell your faculty? How are you caring for them here?
continuing to communicate that you're in their corner and working to their benefit. There are times as for any leader that you want something but you can't get it. And communicating that can go a long way when it doesn't go the way you want.
So we're back to kind of some of our earlier themes. Communication, consistency, truthfulness.
Explain why the board made its decision and avoid becoming in the middle. Don't act like the board's the enemy or teachers are a problem, but make sure that you're not creating problems for yourself trying to placate someone today.
So some transparency, maybe trying to help facilitate more direct communication or clear communication from decision makers. Okay. Full disclosure on this one, I received it from a former staff member. She was very hard on herself in the scenario, which I modified a little bit, but a family at your school, we talk about a few of these things, has a young child who's having some reoccurring discipline issues, defiance, aggression, tantrums. Most of these seem to stem from his being overtired and needing more consistent parental authority and structuring at home, which teachers often have a window into. His parents are an enthusiastic part of the community, but fairly new Christians and have some trouble connecting the ideal with their everyday habits. So far, the classroom has beautifully addressed the disciplinary situations with him, but it's happening frequently enough that things are escalating to the headmaster. And parents and classroom teacher are in tension with one another about a reasonable way forward. To complicate things, the teacher is prone to black and white thinking. This is her description of herself. Especially when looking at discipline, and maybe sharper rhetoric than the situation calls for has been included. Is managing several challenging personal issues. How do you prepare the best environment for a productive meeting with all parties, continuing to exhort and encourage the parents in their vocation while being faithful to the expectations of the school's disciplinary culture? So we're caring for students, faculty, and parents here.
I have to look at it as a partnership. So usually in those situations, as an administrator, I sit down with the teacher, we have a meeting with the parent, and all parties together, and I look at the parents and go, we're here to partner with you. We want to make sure that what we do at school is reinforced at home as much as what you do at home is somewhat reinforced at school. Because we want to communicate that with the student, that the parent and the teacher are in there together to do what's best for the child.
Start every meeting with the parent.
Great. We need to remind ourselves of things that should be obvious but aren't always, right?
Potentially, we think this is going to be a problem, and having them both in the room initially, to meet with each individually first, to set expectations, to maybe unpack some of the details. Maybe you do or don't know the same things that the teacher does, but also in meeting with your faculty, they have a higher responsibility in being in line with you and maybe owning some of the things that could have been better in that scenario, and you can lean on the parents. So helping to cultivate that, talk that through, help them in the things that they can do better, whether maybe it's the black and whiteness, right? Some of those types of things that you can rely more heavily on for your faculty than you can for the parent.
Get a pastor involved, preferably not the same person as the headmaster.
Okay, so if you need some other conflict resolution, right, call upon our pastors. What if you agree that the teacher is prone to black and white thinking and is probably too harsh in the classroom? They know that themselves. How do we care for this teacher? I don't think it's that.
Well, but I mean, I'm not talking about like counseling as you see counseling, but I think just the communication
Okay,
part
communication.
of it.
What's in it? Be really practical, right? How do we model for that teacher an alternative way of?
Yeah, we had an issue with this, and I found it very helpful just to give basically a script to a very young teacher, and just to say, when this kind of problem comes up, say this, not that.
Right? Be really clear.
I mean, really that does help. Because they don't know how to, they know this is wrong and they're trying to fix it, but it just doesn't work. So give them away. It does actually help.
Encourage teachers to take time before responding. And I've repeated the phrase, to respond, not react. And just, even if it means, sleep on it, if it's as simple as that, or wait till the end of the school day, or first thing tomorrow morning. Just put time in between responses.
That's particularly helpful with parents, right? We might have a situation with a child that we need to address quickly, right? Mentoring, again, this is about a professional development plan that we have in place for teachers. All these things are part of it.
The uniqueness of being a Lutheran school is being able to apply law gospel. So when you're working with professional development with your teachers, using Walter's law gospel, now they understand, instead of thinking black and white, thinking law gospel, and the way to apply that in a classroom setting is far more helpful. That way you can include your pastor in instruction with your teachers and how to apply our theology, what we teach, believe, and confess, as a means for discipline.
Just to clarify, did the teacher say appears to be because of sleep? If they're saying appears, that means they're not sure they think.
Well, I mean, right, they know that the student is extremely tired and has a hard time concentrating, right?
I mean, to me, that they need to investigate.
Sure,
if
right.
that's true or not.
Yeah.
There are other issues.
Yep, absolutely. This is about good communication with parents, right? I'm noticing this. Has Johnny been sleeping well? And mom and dad will say, actually, Johnny has not been sleeping at all. It's like, oh, this would have been really helpful to know, right? Encouraging parents to communicate those kinds of things, right? Or dad's been out of town for a month. Okay, that probably is going to impact behavior, right? Or a family member out of state is sick, right? Encouraging families to communicate with you so that you can, and it doesn't mean that child won't receive discipline, right? But it means the kind of relationship and care and love you're giving them can be even more direct.
This might be going in different directions, so feel free to tell me to be quiet. But creating a culture of different habits can help mitigate or prevent a lot of these things. I know obviously once you're in them, it's good to think about how we've gotten here, now what. One of our policies is that if a student has to come to the principal's office more than once, the student has to come with one of his parents to school the next full school day. And that helps a lot with stuff like this, because then the parents are in the classroom, then they see what's going on. And you know, that requires some good communication up front. You can't just bring that on people, obviously. But also the culture of communication with the parents, right? Has this teacher been communicating from the beginning, right? Your child seems tired in class. Is he getting enough sleep? Can we help him? Like, if that happens, it makes the later conversations, even if the teacher has been overzealous in discipline, it makes those conversations a lot easier later on. So,
yeah, those conversations take time and work, and we are asking our faculty to do those, have those conversations even after a long day, but they set up good communications later. They set up a scenario where the head of school can support the faculty member by saying, we know you've been in good communication with the family, right? What happens when we haven't done that and we get to this scenario where we haven't been telling mom and dad that we're having this discipline issue, but it's been going on a really long time, it's really hard then for the administrator just to say to the family, well, you know, here we are, and we're kind of at a breaking point when the family didn't know, right? That hasn't expressed care and love. So on one hand, right, it requires a lot of our faculty, and we should be then providing other means to care for them as we have these high expectations for them. So picking up actually what Mr. Pullman said, what are some of these other habits, policies, as you think about some successes in your own school for care, right? We talked about some of that at the beginning. I mean, a lot of this is about communication, a lot. A lot of this is about relationship building. What are some specific things you do, you've seen that we maybe haven't covered or you want to repeat that you think has shaped the culture of your school in a really intentional way? You'd like to see or you'd like to hear, how are people doing this? How are you connecting with individual faculty members or expressing care to them?
I try to be better at it, but sharing positive things, even if it's, oh, I saw a picture she drew and it was really great, that if all of your conversations are always negative, then you need to take the effort and time to also say positive things,
right?
Just so that they can hear, good things that are going on.
Right,
as well.
and this is true for students and faculty, right? You have to seek out these kind of opportunities, right? It's the, tell us what's happening in your class today, and commending them for a job well done and something like that, okay? What else?
One of the things that we started doing was, we call it Through the Spirit lunches with the headmaster. And one, it gave the opportunity to acknowledge maybe some students don't have the academic success, but they have the spirit qualities. And so we were able to do a monthly award for Through the Spirit for each one of the classrooms. And then to follow that up, we went ahead and did luncheons with the parents. And it gave a great opportunity to finally get to know, because some parents, you're going to see them all the time, but there are some parents where it takes something where you're acknowledging their child for them to actually come to the school or be more involved in the process. And so it was a great opportunity to talk to the parents that sometimes you wouldn't normally get a chance to talk to, so that you started opening those, getting to know them a little bit better to make some of those more difficult conversations if that came up.
We focus a lot on the pedagogy, but really knowing your teachers, which we all try to do, and professional development also includes knowing who those phlegmatic teachers are that are going to have a problem with talking to parents. about the challenges that they're having in the classroom because it is just in their nature to run the other way. And so helping them with that, whether it's classes to send them to, role playing with them, books for them to read, whatever it might be, helping them to be successful in that so that they nor you get in those scenarios where it's now
Personalize that professional development and support as much as possible. Personalized, right? Just relationship building too. Do you know what's happening in your faculty members' families? To the extent they want to share that with you, but are you asking about their own children and their spouses? To the extent you're able, are you inviting them into your home? Pastor Paul mentioned food and drink. Most people love food and drink of some sort, right? Are you able to gather collectively with your faculty and staff regularly to have fellowship? What else? Let's give some more practical examples. You all are the experts in the room.
As a former parent of yours, one thing I really enjoyed was the parent social dinners where it was like everyone get your kid a babysitter and we're gonna have just a parent, gathering so you can actually get to know by the classrooms. I think we did it.
Yeah, family socials.
Yeah. Stuff that's outside of school, just to get to know each other.
One of the things that helps provide, of course, camaraderie and fellowship, and outside, some of the procedures and policies of the school. And a practice I've had, certainly when there's conflict between students, is sometimes saying to a parent, well, have you called the other parent? Have you reached out? And when they've been building relationships, right, that all of a sudden doesn't sound, it's still scary. But it doesn't sound quite so scary, right, because you've shared a meal, or you've had food and drink together, you've enjoyed camaraderie. We are in a community, right, and so we need to provide opportunities for community. A bunch of you have mentioned prayer. We, of course, at my former school, pray for our families. We began, publicly letting know which families we were praying for every week, right, on our prayer sheet that got sent home. So this is the week for these families, and I'm praying for them in chapel publicly. I use that as an opportunity. Okay, these are the 3 or 4 families this week I'm sending a handwritten note to. The schedule's already there. It's already listed on the sheet. I don't have to come up with my own schedule. I do it on Monday. We are praying. The faculty prayed for you this morning. The Monday prayer always, the faculty included the names of the families. Please include these in the classroom prayers, but we modeled it, right? I modeled it. Your pastor can model that. And then you say, I did this, we did this, the faculty and staff are praying. Now you've hit a number of things here. But you've let them know. Maybe you have families who don't pray at home, right? You've now let them know they are being prayed for, and this is a good habit. Depending on the size of your school, and if this is a feasible idea, we started tracking who came to chapel and who hadn't been to chapel. Not to shame anyone, but to then send a personal invitation, a handwritten note. I'd like to see you in chapel. Or make sure when their class was singing for chapel that, we'd love to see you in chapel, right? Any of those personalizations take a lot of time, but they're good fruit. Other ideas in this kind of vein? Or maybe I'll phrase it this way. If anyone's willing to share. Something that you're thinking about as you return to the classrooms. How are you going to challenge yourself? So you're thinking about maybe one of these subcultures and caring for one another. And sometimes it's things we don't do, right? Maybe a way to care for our fellow faculty members is to gossip a little less about them, or to say to the faculty member we're closest to, oh, did you see that? Did you do that? Can you believe Pastor did that? That's a way to care, right? To take a look at those commandments we sang about and heard about this morning and see where we need to make a change. Maybe you know you need to increase communication with parents, whether you're an administrator or a teacher. Maybe there's a particular family or parent you just have been frustrated with for a while. Maybe you're going to work to set aside that frustration or rebuild the relationship. Are there any relationships you need to rebuild? You're going to commit to going to someone as soon as they've offended you to talk, to ask for forgiveness, to show that you care. This is a culture of care, right? We're trying to express love for our neighbor. Who wants to share something they're going to try in the next year or interested in trying?
Well, it's kind of a challenge, I suppose, but like all good Midwestern families, our school seems fraught with families that when there's an issue, they're just quiet about it and they crumble to others. And I'm sitting here with my colleague discussing ways that we've tried to reach out to parents and encourage them to speak to the person that's harmed you, whether it's teacher or parent, whatever. And I guess I'm seeking from you or from others in the room how, as teachers or administrators, we can help that kind of culture to encourage them to speak to the person that has harmed that word, to resolve without grumbling.
Yeah, speak the truth in love. For those of you who, send newsletters out or write your own little brief commentary at the beginning of a weekly newsletter, this is a topic to address, The faculty has been talking about speaking the truth in love and going and modeling for our students, right? This is a way we can kind of softly, if that's needed or necessary, We know that as parents and teachers, we want to model this kind of behavior. So you have to start to show them, right? And you'll have to say what it is, right? But you're the administrator or you're the pastor. Parents are looking to you to speak with authority. You have authority. You are to use it properly, wisely. But and you want to be careful you're not speaking as a pastor, right? If you're the administrator and not a pastor, right? But we can talk about these habits. A habit we are really working on as the faculty. Let the faculty join you in then explaining what this habit is. Parents, won't you join us in, and you run the risk maybe of offending someone or it not being clear what you're saying. So you follow up with, maybe this is the theme for your year or the first 6 months of communication or, think through that. I think parents really benefit from clarity, right? They benefit from you saying, this is who we are as a classical Lutheran school. And we are working to have the classical home. Pastor Paul mentioned the Josh Gibbs article about the classical home. Worth your time, right? Use that language with your families, even if it will take a while to have them understand that. But don't shy away from it, just speak to it. Others will have ideas about that, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, I think, in most of our schools, it's a policy, right? That if somebody has a problem with another person in the school, or the faculty or the parent, go talk to them first. And in my experience, the problem is when we don't actually enforce the policy. Right? So when somebody comes to another parent and says, hey, what about Steve over there? Okay. The parent says, have you talked to Steve? Right? And it's harder when it's exclusively among the parents. You're not quite as much in that. But again, modeling it with the faculty. One of my clear examples there was somebody talking to the administrator, and it didn't seem like they talked exactly to the teacher first. And my response always to that is, where's the communication back and forth? I hope you did it in person, because that's also in our policies. Right? But to have those as policies and then try to just enforce them and live them as the faculty will at least model it. It's not obviously going to fix it.
Right, and that communication, again, picking up on the technology aspect of Pastor Paul's comments, and the need for us to reshape our habits, not let our children develop these habits, but what are our own habits? Are we just sending that email? Former faculty that know me, we had policies where you're not allowed to send an email about a behavior or academic issue, you must call. Now, if the parent does not return your connect, you can email a parent to say, could I set up a time to talk with you? That's a fine use and a practical use for email. Here would be the time you're available, could you let me know? What happens when you email about Joey's horrible bad day? Then mom reads it at 5 o'clock. She sends a long email back. You send a long email back. Everyone's checking email all night. Everyone is anxious. Things are said that shouldn't have been said. There's a tone that everyone misunderstood. It can be hard to call mom at the end of the day and say, this was the day Joey had, and let's talk about it. But my experience is usually in 5 to 7 minutes, we've had a great conversation, we've reset for the next day, we've built relationship, we had a good chat. Mom was able to say, I really appreciate you. And the teacher was like, well, great, thank you. Great, so the way and the method we're communicating is really important. And the technology aspect of our world should really be influencing, the what not to do here, right? So stay away from email other than reminders about pizza lunch and field trip permission slips. Otherwise, call people on the phone. Okay, whose birthday is closest to today? You get my next prize. That's a really big cop-out.
Today?
Today! Happy Leckman! Okay, I will let you choose since it's actually your birthday. A token work, Leaf by Nigel, or Letters from Vincent van Gogh? Letters, good choice.
Okay, if you are not, this is a plug about great literature. The Trinity Forum, you can order these short selections of great literary work, speeches. They're great for professional development, or giveaways for your family.
Or other such things. Okay, who wants to have the last word on a habit? Who's going to be brave? What is a habit you are going to commit to, recommit to, try that expresses a culture of care in your school next year?
Keep chapel at 30 minutes.
That is caring for your people. That is caring for your people.
There would be consistency. You guys with Redeemer can duke that out later in the hallway. Anybody else? Come on, commit. Let's do it. Anyone? Everybody feels well cared for? You got it down? All right. Well, God's blessings on your year ahead. It is joyful work to love our neighbor, but it is also hard and tiring. This is true. But I will be praying for your schools and for you, and look forward to continued conversation the rest of this week. So God's blessings, and we'll see you at Vespers, which will be 30 minutes.